January 2021 Finance and Personnel Committee is roll call. So Michael.
Alderman Bob Bauman. Alderman Bauman. Mr. Mark Flaherty. James Cantor.
Here.
Mr. Scott Mansky. Mr. Greg Marcus. Ms. Aicha Sawa. In the room, we have Mr. Marty Brooks, Ms. Sarah Mayo, Mr. Steve Marsh, Attorney Kirk Pelican, myself, Kyle Graham, and Michael Dixon.
Yeah.
We have a quorum. We have a quorum.
Thank you. First order of business would be the approval or any discussion and the approval of the meeting minutes from October 8th, 2020 from the Finance and Personnel Committee. I would entertain a motion to approve if no discussion.
So move to approve.
Thank you, Greg. Do I have a second? Is there a discussion, or are we waiting? We're waiting for a second approval.
Looks like Scott Mansky is rejoining. Or no? Okay. Admin.
Aicha or Bob?
I'll make the motion. Sorry.
Sorry, we had a motion. I'm looking for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll make the second.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We didn't want to get stuck on that one. All right. I appreciate it. All in favor? Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We have approved the meeting minutes from October 8th of 2020. Next order of business is Mr. Steve Marsh to provide a financial update for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Today, we'll be reviewing an updated forecast for the 2020 income statement, the first forecast of the year for the 2021 income statement, and the 12-month projected operational and restricted cash positions. The key takeaways for today are that we're revising down net income for both 2020 and 2021, largely due to a projected decrease in tax revenue collections. However, our cash positions will remain relatively healthy through the end of calendar year 2021. But before we get into the numbers today, I do want to highlight a few notes regarding event activity. As has been the case since March, attempting to accurately project with any certainty the impact of COVID-19 on the district's event calendar has been challenging. The pandemic has caused a tremendous amount of volatility within our industry, and the individual actions and decisions by meeting planners, concert promoters, and the sports leagues have become increasingly unpredictable. This set of circumstances caused management, when developing the 2021 budget that the board adopted in October, to take a conservative approach when attempting to project event activity in 2021. We elected not to budget all of the confirmed events on our calendar, knowing that evolving circumstances surrounding the pandemic could cause some of these events to cancel. Thus far, our budget approach, I believe, has proved to be prudent when the Admirals and UWM announced, and the wave before them, that they will not play their 2020-2021 season games at UWM Panther Arena. While the confirmed loss of this event activity is certainly sobering news, there is no impact to the district's financial plan as a result of these announcements. As discussed at the October board meeting, we elected not to include games from our arena attendance in our year-end 2020 forecast or in the first and second quarter of the 2021 budget. We are optimistic, however, that our three team partners will again take up residence in the UWM Panther Arena and resume a normal seasonal schedule in the fall of 2021. As for our meetings and conventions business, I'll bluntly say that our sales team and Visit Milwaukee has been working like hell to keep the business we already have on the books in 21, as well as to add to that number by year end. The finance team walked through the 2021 event calendar with our VP of Sales, Megan Setman late last week and determined at this time that there's not sufficient reason to reduce our net operating income projections for 2021. Some events have moved off of their original dates, but have been rescheduled to later in the year, and none of consequence have given notice of cancellation, nor do we feel there's an outsized risk of that occurring as we sit here today. As for new event activity, as we reported in December, the presidential election recount event in November was a net positive to forecast. The 10-day event occurred in November around the Thanksgiving holiday and was executed in such a way that prioritized the health and safety of our staff, guests, media, and the public while allowing us to earn some much needed event income. Similarly, and just recently announced and currently underway, is an event in which we've transformed our ballroom into a COVID-19 vaccine clinic. We've worked closely with the city of Milwaukee over the last 2 weeks to produce and execute a contract and design an event that again prioritizes the health and safety of our staff and guests. And I probably can't sufficiently put into words what hosting an event like this means to the WCD. Certainly the positive impact this has to our 2021 income statement is critically important and helps to partially offset the reduction in projected tax revenues. But I also can't think of a better event for the district to host that allows WCD staff to embrace and showcase our shared dedication to being bold, being proud, and being experience obsessed. Hosting any event at the WCD during this pandemic gives us all a sense of purpose right now. But to be part of the global-wide mission to eradicate COVID-19 is truly special. I think I can speak for everyone at the district when I say how proud we all are to contribute to this effort. Marty, is there anything you wanted to add to that before we jump into the financials?
Yes. I first would like to acknowledge how proud I am of you to hear those words from you about what this event means to the district, because it does. One of the things that I found somewhat sobering over the past 3 years was that the district and the convention center itself, our primary purpose and clientele is not Milwaukee. And so people, while they're familiar with the Fiserv Forum, they're not really familiar with the district and the convention center as others may be. So for us to be able to, with this event, do something that really connects us with the community and the city in a meaningful way, puts us in, I believe, in a great light, and a light that really, hopefully, will create greater awareness and hopefully help us establish a connection with the residents of downtown. So it's a great event for that purpose, as well as the fact that we are able to keep our staff working and able to generate event income when otherwise nothing would be generated. So in many levels, this is a really positive event for us, although the situation we wish weren't existing. But I echo your comments, Steve. Thank you for saying.
Okay, so to the financial statements, let's jump into the 2020 income statement first. And I'll draw your attention to the 4th page of the income statement packet there. And this is with column IDs M, N, O, and P at the top. This page compares our current income statement forecast as of today to our last forecast that was sent to the Finance Committee on December 11th. Jumping right to the bottom of the document, you'll notice that the net income forecast is projected to decrease by just over $500,000 as noted on line 67, column O. This decrease is driven almost entirely by an expected decrease in tax revenues relative to last forecast, as noted on line 35, column O. As we reported in December, hotel tax revenues have not come in as strongly as we had expected. Additionally, the October tax revenue results that we received from the Department of Revenue shortly after sending to the board the December update brought with it less than expected food and beverage tax revenues. As a result of these data points, Marty and I took a step back to reevaluate our projections for the remainder of 2020 and onward into 2021. And based on our recent results, updated projections from industry analysis and through discussions with our peer set throughout the city, we adjusted downward tax revenues for the next 12 months. And Greg, I appreciate the referral to Jeff. He was very helpful in our efforts here. Just so the committee is aware, Greg extended an offer for me to reach out to the VP of Finance for the Marcus organization to compare notes on hotel revenue projections and general economic conditions pertaining to the industry. That discussion helped me and Marty focus our numbers going forward. And I would certainly welcome other referrals on this topic. We by no means have a crystal ball, so we're eager to hear how others are evaluating the current situation and projecting numbers moving forward. Elsewhere in the income statement, the variances to the last forecast are generally positive. Net operating income, line 29, increased, driven largely by food and beverage revenue, which is line 4. The forecast in December underestimated Levy's profitability surrounding the election recount event, and also did not include some cost-saving measures Levy has implemented to keep overhead expenses down. Earlier this week, we also received the December Levy numbers, and I'm expecting to see continued improvement in this category for 2020 when numbers become final over the next month or two. Line 13, other income, improved by just over $44K as we salvaged some escalator parts no longer needed after the completion of the escalator modernization project. We also recognize as revenue cancellation fees associated with some of the meeting and conventions that elected to not hold their event at the district in 2020. Operating expenses, line 28, have generally been held down, and non-operating expenses, line 66, overall remain flat from last forecast. One other line item to note in forecast is line 65, bond interest expense. As you're aware, we've been working with our audit team to ensure our accounting entries related to the 2 bond transactions that closed in 2020 have been accurately recorded. At this time, I think it's fair to say that bond interest expense, as we see it here today, is likely understated. Our original assumptions contemplated amortizing the closing expenses associated with the bond transaction over the life of the debt. However, after discussing with Baker Tilly earlier this week, we'll be expensing most of these costs in 2020. This is a non-cash item. It doesn't affect operating cash, but will ultimately affect the income statement and reduce net income when we adjust for those entries before closing our books for the year. Are there any questions regarding the 2020 income statement forecast? Okay. As for the 2021 income statement, which should be the next page in your packet, and this has column IDs E, F, G, and H at the top, as well as the words 2021 income statement budget in the header. You'll see that we've decreased our overall net income number by about 2.8 million, which is line 67, column G. And as I previously mentioned, this decrease is driven largely by the decrease in expected tax revenue collections for 2021. You'll notice that operating revenues and expenses are up as a result of the modification to our event mix, including the addition of the vaccine clinic. I also want to point out that the net positive change to naming rights revenue, line 11. As Marty mentioned in his CEO update in December, we were actively working to renegotiate the terms of our deal with Molson Coors and came to terms earlier this week. The positive change in revenue here reflects that deal, and Marty will touch on that briefly during his CEO update. The rest of the income statement remains relatively stable and consistent with the projections we made in October during the budget process. We're 2 weeks into the 2021 fiscal year. There will be many more iterations of these income statement forecasts throughout the year. As I mentioned earlier, our budget approach has protected, I believe, our financial plan from significant downside risk. And I do believe our recalibration of the tax revenues sufficiently accounts for the current economic environment affecting the hotel and restaurant industry within the city and the county. Are there any questions on the 21 income statement? Okay, so the next question here, I guess, is how do these changes affect cash? So we'll take a look at the next page of your packet, which is the operating cash flow projection. These have the months of January through December horizontally across the top of the document. Overall, the cash balance for operational purposes remains stable. The reduction in projected city hotel taxes was offset by the reduction in the payment to Visit Milwaukee and the increase in event revenues due to the modification of the event mix. We also fully incorporated the Molson Coors payments into the forecast, which were previously left out of projections. As we've discussed before, should there be additional pressures on our cash balances, we do have several mitigation strategies available to us, including drawing on the operating reserve account, which is held by our trustee at US Bank, as well as working with Visit Milwaukee to defer into 2022 some of the payments that were deferred from 2020. And as it pertains to Visit Milwaukee, just so the committee is aware, I do have weekly conversations with their finance chief, Luis Ayala, and we're constantly exchanging information, including tax revenue data and how that impacts Visit's payment. And while the news hasn't been positive since March, the open lines of communication have helped both organizations plan and strategize together. The district certainly recognizes the importance of what our funding to Visit Milwaukee means, not just for their business, but ours as well. And we'll continue to work together to ensure that we are meeting our short-term business objectives during this pandemic. As for restricted cash, which is the next page of your packet, and this is the reserve balance that we have to pay down our debt service. We expect this will still grow by $3 million over the course of the year, even with the reduction in our tax projections. Total debt service this year is scheduled to be about $13.8 million. Based on our current balances, the district has no concern about meeting its debt service obligations over the next 12 months. Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Scott.
So is your operating cash flow projection that you had, is that reflective of your changes in the 2021 income statement?
That's correct, Scott.
So that reflects the down that, well, both in the restricted cash and in the operating cash, right?
That's right. The reduction in tax revenues affects both restricted and unrestricted. So the operational cash is affected by the decrease in the city hotel tax, and that is incorporated into this projection, whereas the reductions in the food and beverage, the county hotel tax, and the rental car tax are incorporated into the restricted cash projection.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Just one last note. The bond sale proceeds for the expansion of the convention center were deposited with our trustee at US Bank in December. We could begin drawing on those funds as early as next month to start paying for service provided to us by architects and engineers as the project begins to ramp up. And Marty will touch briefly on that during his CEO update. Mr. Chairman, that is our finance update today.
One other question.
Yes, Scott.
So from the bond funds, did you already draw down the money? I think you drew it down in 2020 from repaying yourself for other capital items from prior years?
That's correct, Scott. That cash is incorporated into our operating cash flow projections right here.
Okay.
That's correct.
And for the Visit Milwaukee, you held back funds in 2020 from them so that it could more average out and because of what you saw occurring during 2021.
Yeah, we deferred approximately $3.8 million that was due to Visit Milwaukee, Scott, and working with Visit Milwaukee, we're attempting to repay 50% of that in 2021 and the other 50% in 2022. And that 50% payment is incorporated into this operational cash flow.
It's more in the back half of the year.
That's correct.
From what I see in there.
Yeah. Right now it's earmarked for July through December.
Starting in July. Great. Any other questions for Steve? All right, Steve, thank you for continuing to fight through this, and thanks for others who have thanks for reaching out. I think we're gonna need a lot of advice from a lot of folks and forecasts and things, so thanks for taking that proactive approach, and great, thanks for you and your team for stepping in and willing to exchange some information. Next, live and in person, off surgery, and probably about 30 pounds lighter, Marty Brooks, CEO update.
Good morning, everyone. Bob, we're missing you in person this morning. We even ordered a special breakfast in anticipation of your arrival, but your loss is our gain, figuratively and literally, so we do miss having you here, Bob.
I'll be there next week.
Good, we're counting on it. I've mentioned over the course of last year that back in January of last year, we started in anticipation of the expansion coming to fruition, that we would need to contract with an entity to represent us in our quest to obtain a naming rights sponsor for Wisconsin Center and potentially Miller High Life Theater. We identified a dozen different firms over a year ago, met with 6 that we felt were viable to represent us, narrowed that list down around early part of November to 3, and have selected a firm that we feel will be able to secure us a significant naming rights partner in the next 12 to 18 months. I hope to have the agreement finalized so that at the board meeting next week I can share the name with you, but I'm hesitant to do that until we have T's crossed and I's dotted. I did speak with Kirk Pelican just prior to this meeting. There are a couple of contract points that were outstanding that we received yesterday. I think we're in agreement how we can resolve that. So I'm optimistic that at next week's board meeting we'll be able to share with you our agent. Very encouraged about this. Unlike a lot of other projects, naming rights was not baked into the financial model to obtain the funding. So this is a revenue stream that we believe will help us on the operating side of the business. And again, we're very encouraged that there, even though we've got a tough market now with COVID-19, we do believe, based upon what different representatives have shared with us, that there is a market to associate with that property. More to come on that. Segueing from the naming rights moving forward, we had discussed in the past that on October 31st of last year, that was the deadline that our naming rights agreement with Molson Coors for the Miller High Life Theater was scheduled to come up. We have been engaged in very positive, collegial, respectful discussions with Molson Coors for the past 3 months, given their license agreement and how the lack of activity triggers their ability to take a reduction in payment. We felt that it was in our best interest, as did Molson Coors, that we look to not forgive them for the payments, but see if there was a way we could take what was otherwise contracted and still retain that by moving out the expiration of the naming rights for the theater. I'm happy to say that on Tuesday of this week, we executed the amendment between the entities. So Molson Coors will retain the name Miller High Life Theater through December 31st of 22. So we're seeing that, and really the extension period is commensurate and reflects the downtime that we're seeing in the loss of event activity for Miller High Life Theater. So we also worked, because what was interesting is their desire to push out even further their first right of negotiation and last right of refusal moving forward beyond 22. And they did understand our position that with the expansion and looking to have a naming rights sponsor secured for the entire complex, that we just weren't willing to extend their last right to match beyond what currently is contemplated, which is December of this year. So I think we're in a really good place moving forward with Miller High Life Theater. The conversations were very encouraging to me that there may be a role for them at the end of this contract. So that's encouraging. And I know the local distributor is very interested in keeping that relationship going. So from a cash flow basis, Steve Marsh was very happy to see that we're going to see that money coming in. So that's the latest from the Miller High Life Theater. Not attending this meeting, but as part of the board meeting and all subsequent board meetings, Mike Abrams, who you've met in the past from CA Icon, will be attending and have a position in the full board meetings to give you an update on where we are with the expansion. We started getting the band back together the week of January 4th. Bob Seefeld, who's our VP of Facilities, and I are meeting weekly now with Icon to go over the project in totality. And we now have meetings with the architects and the design team every other week moving forward. Firstly, we're going through and checking, making sure that the budget as we had prepared for this project is still reasonable. And thus far, we feel that we're in a good place and expect that there may even be opportunities to do things a little cheaper because, or less expensively, because the marketplace may be more competitive than we initially thought to provide labor and goods and services. So that could work to our advantage. We're looking at the construction timeline. At this point, we're still anticipating taking the parking lot and readying it for construction November, December of this year with groundbreaking sometime late December, early January of next year. So more to come on that, and Mike will give you a more thorough update next week as he gets his information together. One thing that we are moving forward with and had been scheduled for January, and we have delayed until February 16th and 17th, is working with Visit Milwaukee. We wanted to reach out and solicit input from national meeting planners who are part of the Visit Milwaukee Advisory Board. So we have two one-day focus groups with two different groups of people, 16th and 17th of February, with the architects to sit with them, learn from them what has worked for them in other facilities, and walking them through the design as we see it. What do they see as opportunities or things that could potentially cause problems for them, so we can address them, react to them early on in this next phase of design, as opposed to after the fact when it could become more costly to make those adjustments. So all very good, and we're looking to get as much input as possible to make this as much directed to the users as what we would think it should be. As Steve mentioned, it is very challenging for Megan Setman, her staff, and Vince Paquette, who does our event bookings for in the theater and arena, based upon the existing limitations for capacity that we have with the health department. Right now, we're set at 10 people. So until we can see that grow to 250 or more, we're quite limited in the type of events we can go after. What is encouraging, though, is not just in our venues are we seeing an increase in inquiries for dates for the third and fourth quarter. We've also gotten some confirmations from the Fiserv Forum that they've had shows that have been previously canceled or postponed, booking for September and later in this year. So it is encouraging that there seems to be activity now. I've got to believe it's with the vaccine now being distributed that people are getting optimistic that at some point mid-late summer, the ability to get together in large groups is going to allow itself to happen. So that's all encouraging, and hopefully we'll see that that matches what we have in our plan. So hopefully that fact holds true for us in the months to come. One thing that really the last thing I just wanted to mention, as far as other cost-saving measures that we are maintaining, and certainly everyone knows not to spend a dime without Steve or my approval on it. One of the things that traditionally and historically has been the case is that in the first pay period of January, we have given increases to staff. Staff was notified that at least through March, we're holding back on doing any pay increases. We will reassess in March to see how our business is responding to COVID. If we see that there's an opportunity and business is coming in, we will reassess and hopefully be able to implement merit and performance increases. But until such time as the business can support it, we will be holding back doing any type of increases for the staff. And they're aware of that and certainly understanding of that. So Mr. Chairman, that's it for my report.
Any questions for Marty? All right, I think you covered both the CEO and the expansion
Yes.
update, right?
Yeah.
Matt? Appreciate that. And then we want to review the agenda for next week, Marty, please. I think we have it attached. Just briefly go through it. If there's any additions or subtractions anyone has. I think it's right before the schedule, meeting schedule.
This is fairly consistent with what we discussed today, consistent with the way we've done the meetings in the past. Steve is going to as much go through the same information for the full board as he did with you today, perhaps a little bit faster, but still prepared to take any questions the full board may have. Hopefully by next week I'll be able to share with the group the name of the firm we've selected to represent us for naming rights. And you'll have Mike Abrams giving you a presentation on where we are with the expansion to date.
Great. Anything else anyone would like to see from the finance side or personnel side?
I just have one question. So for future financial updates, will we be getting a report of, the capital project for the new facility and the status of the funds and the budget and the comparison of actual spending to where we're at in that budget?
Absolutely, Scott. We will share with the board where we are with any pending disbursements, actual disbursements, so you can track and follow along with us how we're progressing with the project.
It's a great question. Thanks, Scott. We'll start probably.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions, additions? All right. Michael, I think we have our future meeting, not only our committee meeting dates, but our board meeting dates. I know our live or video still, right?
Correct.
In person or video dates. I think next Friday is our next full board meeting for everybody. We'll be meeting with the governance committee right after this today. So those meetings usually are back to back. So if there's any input or anything else you has in that, but please mark your calendars accordingly. If you can't make it, please let us know. But I know I've seen one or two conflicts on my schedule already, but we'll figure that out. And we're going to be going virtual for the near future as long as we can see. Is that right?
We have invited, we're limited to 10 people.
Right.
So based upon people who have responded and want to attend in person, only very few. So at this point, next week's board meeting will be in this room, as will future, but we'll play it by ear what the health department tells us we can do.
Okay, great. Yep, thank you. Just want to make sure everyone's on. So if you can or want to come in person to the board meeting, please let Michael know. I'm sure you've sent that out already.
Yeah.
All right. Any other discussion items for this committee or for the board? If not, thank you. I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
This is Aisha. I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Aisha. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Scott. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. The meeting is adjourned, and we will see you either live or in person next Friday. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, thank
Thanks.
you.
Mr. Joel Brennan,
Present.
Mr. Grady Crosby, Senator Latanya Johnson,
Here.
Mr. James Cantor.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. First order of business is any discussion around the November 12th, 2020 governance meeting minutes? Discussion, if not, I would entertain a motion for approval of the meeting minutes.
I'll move. This is Brennan.
Second, Johnson.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Mr. Marsh, please provide our financial update to the team.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Today, we'll be reviewing an updated forecast for the 2020 income statement, the first forecast of the year for the 2021 income statement, and the 12-month projected operational and restricted cash positions. The key takeaways for today are that we are revising down net income for both 20 and 2021, largely due to a projected decrease in tax revenue collections. However, our cash positions will remain relatively healthy through the end of calendar year 2021. Now, before we get into the numbers today, I do want to highlight a few notes regarding event activity. As has been the case since March, attempting to accurately project with any certainty the impact of COVID-19 on the district's event calendar has been challenging. The pandemic has caused a tremendous amount of volatility within our industry, and the individual actions and decisions by meeting planners, concert promoters, and sports leagues have become increasingly unpredictable. This set of circumstances caused management, when developing the 2021 budget that the board adopted in October, to take a conservative approach when attempting to project event activity in 2021. We elected not to budget all of the confirmed events on our calendar, knowing that evolving circumstances surrounding the pandemic could cause some of these events to cancel. Thus far, our budget approach has proved to be prudent when the Admirals and UWM announced, and the wave before then, that they will not play their 2020-2021 season games at UWM Panther Arena. While the confirmed loss of this event activity is certainly sobering news, there is no impact to the district's financial plan as a result of these announcements. As discussed at the October board meeting, we elected not to include games from our arena tenants in our year-end 2020 forecast or in the first and second quarter of our 2021 budget. We're optimistic, however, that our three-team partners will again take up residence in the UWM Panther Arena and resume a normal seasonal schedule in the fall of 2021. As for our meetings and conventions business, I'll bluntly say that our sales team and Visit Milwaukee have been working like hell to keep the business we already have on the books in 21, as well as add to that number by year end. The finance team walked through the 2021 event calendar with our VP of Sales, Megan Setman, late last week, and determined at this time that there's not sufficient reason to reduce our net operating income projections for 2021. Some events have moved off their original dates, but have also been rescheduled to later in the year, and none of consequence have given notice of cancellation, nor do we feel that there's an outsized risk of that occurring as we sit here today. As for new event activity, as we reported in December, the presidential election recount event in November was a net positive to our forecast. This 10-day event occurred in November around the Thanksgiving holiday and was executed in such a way that prioritized the health and safety of our staff, guests, media, and the public, while allowing us to earn some much needed event income. Similarly, and just recently announced and currently underway, is an event in which we've transformed our ballroom into a COVID-19 vaccine clinic. We've worked closely with the city of Milwaukee over the last 2 weeks to produce and execute a contract and design an event that again prioritizes the health and safety of our staff and guests. And I probably can't sufficiently put into words what hosting an event like this means to the WCD. Certainly the positive financial impact this has to our 2021 income statement is critically important and helps to partially offset the reduction in projected tax revenues. But I also can't think of a better event for the district to host that allows WCD staff to embrace and showcase our shared dedication to being bold, being proud, and being experience obsessed. Hosting any event at the WCD during this pandemic gives us all a sense of purpose right now. But to be a part of the global-wide mission to eradicate COVID-19 is truly special. And I think I can speak for everyone at the district today when I say how proud we all are to contribute to this effort. Marty, is there anything you would like to add to that?
I just want to underscore what you've just said. One of the real challenges I think we have is making our presence and real importance to the residents of Milwaukee be felt. So much of our business is directed to visitors of Milwaukee, out-of-towners, that we don't necessarily have the type of connection locally with our residents, and to be really at the forefront and the front door for the COVID vaccine. I'm hoping makes a connection and creates a relationship with us and our public that will benefit us in the years to come. And I think, hopefully will also get us support for the fact that the expansion is coming and get them behind it. So I appreciate your comments there, Steve.
Okay, so to the financial statements, let's jump into the 2020 income statement forecast first, and I'll draw your attention to the fourth page of that income statement document. That has column IDs M, N, O, and P at the top. This page compares our current income statement forecast as of January 14th to our last forecast that was sent out to our committees and the board in December. Jumping right to the bottom of the document, you'll notice that the net income forecast is projected to decrease just over $500,000 as noted in line 67, column O. This decrease is driven almost entirely by an expected decrease in tax revenues relative to the last forecast, as noted on line 35, column O. As we reported in December, hotel tax revenues have not come in as strongly as we had expected. Additionally, the October tax revenue results that we received from the Department of Revenue shortly after sending to the board the December update brought with it less than expected food and beverage tax revenues. As a result, Marty and I took a step back to reevaluate our projections for the remainder of 2020 and onward into 2021. Based on our recent results, updated projections from industry analysts, and through discussions with our peer set throughout the city, we adjusted downward tax revenues for the next 12 months. And just so this committee is aware, Greg Marcus offered to us a referral to his finance chief over at the Marcus Corporation, and we had a pretty good discussion with him. We were able to compare notes on hotel revenue projections and general economic conditions pertaining to the industry. That discussion really helped me and Marty focus our numbers going forward, and I would certainly welcome other referrals on the topic. If there's somebody you think we should be reaching out to, please don't hesitate to reach out to me offline, and I'd be happy to do so. We by no means have a crystal ball on this topic and are eager to hear how others are evaluating the current situation and projecting numbers moving forward. Elsewhere in the income statement, the variances to the last forecast are generally positive. Net operating income, line 29, increased, driven largely by food and beverage revenue, which is line 4. The forecast in December underestimated Levy's profitability surrounding the election recount event, and also did not include some of the cost-saving measures Levy has implemented to keep overhead expenses down. Earlier this week, the December Levy numbers became available to us, so I'm expecting to see continued improvement in this category for 2020 when we finalize numbers over the next month or two. Line 13, other income, improved by just over $44,000 as we salvaged some escalator parts no longer needed after the completion of the escalator modernization project. And we also recognize as revenue cancellation fees associated with some of the meeting and conventions that elected to not hold their event at the district in 2020. Operating expenses, line 28, have generally been held down, and non-operating expenses, line 66, overall remain flat from the last forecast. And just one last note on this page, we're likely to increase the bond interest expense number. And we've been in conversations with our auditors at Baker Tilly. Our earlier assumption on this matter related to the 2 bond transactions that closed in 2020 was that we would amortize some of this expense over the life of the debt. Instead, we will be recognizing that expense in 2020. It's a non-cash item, so it won't affect our operational restricted cash flows, but it will likely decrease our net income when we close our books again in the next month or two. Are there any questions regarding the 2020 income statement? Okay, as for the 2021 income statement, which should be the next page in your packet, and this has column IDs E, F, G, and H at the top. as well as the words 2021 income statement budget in the header, you'll see that we've decreased our overall net income number by about 2.8 million, which is line 67, column G. As previously mentioned, this decrease is driven largely by the decrease in expected tax revenue collections. You'll notice that operating revenues and expenses are up as a result of the modification to our event mix, including the addition of the COVID-19 vaccine clinic. I also want to point out the net positive change to naming rights revenue, which is line 11. As Marty mentioned in his CEO update in December, we were actively working to renegotiate the terms of our theater naming rights deal with Molson Coors, and we did come to terms with them earlier this week. This positive change reflects that deal, and Marty will talk more about that renewal in his CEO update. The rest of the income statement remains relatively stable and consistent with the projections we made in October. We're only 2 weeks into our 2021 fiscal year. There will be many more iterations of these income statement forecasts throughout the year. But as I mentioned earlier, our budget approach has protected our financial plan from significant downside risk. And I do believe our recalibration of tax revenues sufficiently accounts for the current economic environment affecting the hotel and restaurant industry within the city and the county. Are there any questions on the 21 income statement? Okay, so the last two documents are cash flow projections. The first one is operating cash flow. And this has the months of January through December listed horizontally at the top of the document. Overall, the cash balance for operational purposes does remain stable. The reduction in projected city hotel taxes was offset by the reduction in the payment to Visit Milwaukee and the increase in event revenues due to the modification of the event mix. We also fully incorporated the Molson Coors sponsorship payments into this forecast, which were previously left out of projections. As we've discussed before, should there be additional pressures on our cash balances, we do have several mitigation strategies available to us, including drawing on the operating reserve account held by our trustee at US Bank, as well as working with Visit Milwaukee to defer into 2022 some of the payments that were deferred from 2020. And as it pertains to Visit Milwaukee, I have weekly conversations with their finance chief, Luis Ayala, and we're constantly exchanging information, including tax revenue data and how that impacts visits payment. And while the news hasn't been positive since March, the open lines of communication have helped both organizations plan and strategize together. The district certainly recognizes the importance of what our funding to Visit means for their business and ours, and we will continue to work together to ensure that we are meeting our short-term business objectives during this pandemic. As for the restricted cash, which is the reserve balance we have to pay down our debt service, we do expect that to still grow by over $3 million this year, even with the reduction in our tax projections. Debt service this year is scheduled to be $13.8 million. Based on our current balances, the district has no concern about meeting its debt service obligations over the next 12 months. Are there any questions on the cash flow statements? Then just one last note for today. The bond sale proceeds for the expansion of the convention center were deposited with our trustee at US Bank in December. We could begin drawing on those funds as early as next month to pay for services provided to us by architects and engineers as the project begins to ramp up, which Marty will touch on briefly during his CEO update. That is our update, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Any questions for Steve? Appreciate you staying on top of this and kind of guiding us through all this, Steve. Appreciate it. You and Marty doing a great job with that. So appreciate it. Marty, over to you. Give us an update besides how the surgery is. Marty's here live and in person with us. So, and I will say it, a bit of a lighter version of Marty. He is in tip-top shape. So.
Thank you for that, Jim. I'll say lighter, but tip-top shape. That part's
gone too far there.
I do want to acknowledge, just because it changed since the call started. Grady Crosby did join the call.
Okay,
Grady's
great.
now part of.
Thank you.
Since the top of the call, really.
Welcome, Grady.
As far as CEO report, I mentioned the early part of last year that we had begun identifying firms to solicit to represent us for the naming rights should in fact we be fortunate to get the expansion funded. We started out and called together a list of about 12 different firms that have success in this field, narrowed it down to 6 that we met with, some virtually, some in person, because it did start in January before the travel restrictions really came into play. Picked the top 3, and at a point now where we are literally crossing T's and dotting I's with a firm to represent us. I do expect to have the services agreement documented, if not today, then by tomorrow, so I'll be able to share with the full board the name of the organization, but they've got a lot of success in selling naming rights in a very wide range of different properties and events that they've represented. So we're encouraged by being able to make this association now. It was really a goal of mine to have a firm on board working with us when we got to this point in the expansion where we were really getting into design. I don't know that we'll be successful with this, but from my perspective, to be able to get a naming rights partner on board sometime in the next 6 to 12 months while we're still in the design phase will I believe, be more valuable to those partners that we're soliciting, because we'll be able to integrate them more in the design aspect as opposed to saying, here's your 12 by 14 area. How would you like it designed for activation? So we certainly couldn't be out soliciting until we had a project go. I'm hopeful that we get this signed tomorrow. They're working with the design team starting next week. Another service that they'll be providing us, as was the case with the Fiserv Forum, and is often the case in projects, you have a group working with the owner's rep, and while the owner's rep is procuring goods for the actual project, they're working with the sponsorship company to try and solicit partnerships, so that if we're going to spend $1 million with the TV provider, we're working with the different TV providers to see who can we get to be a founding partner of the expansion, so the money goes both ways. So that's also a reason to have the naming rights partner on board, that they're going to serve the function as being a national sales rep with us, working with Icon and Gilbane. Again, that'll be should be signed, if not today, tomorrow. I'll take the segue from naming rights of the expansion to what Steve mentioned about our discussion with Molson Coors. Miller High Life Theater naming rights is expired October 31st. Early in October, we began discussions with Molson Coors about how are we going to reconcile the force majeure component of our advertising agreement with them. Their initial position was that, look, we owe you 2/3 thereabouts of the naming rights fee, but based upon the force majeure language, we're prepared to pay you a little something based on the value of the sign on Kilbourne, but they haven't had activity in the building since March. And I wasn't surprised by that position, but we flipped it around and said, well, hey, we'd love for you to stick around. Let's talk about this. Is there any way to preserve the monies that you've already allocated for this project, but push out the expiration date? And a lot of very healthy exchange of asks and acceptances and rejections and counter proposals. But Tuesday of this week, we signed the amendment that continues Molson Coors and Miller High Life specifically as a naming rights sponsor for the theater through December 31st of 22. They have a first right of negotiation that runs through December 31st of this year, which we were comfortable with. It was a very important gift to them. They really wanted it to go beyond 21 as far as a last right to match. But given the fact that we need to be out on the street with a naming rights partner for potentially the entire campus, including the theater, ultimately they agreed to have that expire December of this year, and we're able to preserve the money that is due. So we did not have any money in the 21 budget for naming rights partner, because we really assumed come October 31st, Miller would be done in 20, and there'd be no carryover for at least 21, potentially even longer. So that's we were able to salvage that and have that cash coming in as part of our cash flow for 2021. Just as an aside, before I wrap up with this, it was very encouraging. And I had both Sarah Mayo and Steve Marsh involved in virtually all the conversations with Steve Flatt from Molson Coors. They were very upbeat and very positive discussions. And not that they shouldn't be, but given what happened at the ballpark and how they're evaluating their spends, Steve was very candid that there are other people in the market that they've had discussions with where the conversations haven't been cordial. So to be able to keep a partnership with Miller and Molson Coors, long range is important to us. And if it can't be at the level that it is currently or more, we certainly want to continue a relationship with them. So I was really pleased how both sides handled the discussions and really happy we got this done. Moving forward, and at next week's board meeting, I'll have Mike Abrams from CAA Icon, who you've all met before, at next week's board meeting and then all subsequent board meetings for the next 3 years, give you an update. Sometimes it will be fairly comprehensive, sometimes there might not be a lot to report on, but we want to make sure that the board is up to date and provided a forum to ask questions so that if you get asked questions or have any of your own, you feel that we have been responsive to your questions and are keeping you informed as to where we are with the project. We began meeting with I like to say we got the band back together for reunion tours. We started the week of January 4th. Steve, Bob Seefeld, and I, who's our VP of Facilities, are meeting every week with ICON, going over a touch base on where we are with the different aspects of the project. Every 2 weeks now, we're having design calls with the architectural design team, and that will continue for the next 3 years as well. We are having 2 series of focus groups, February 16th and 17th, with members of the Visit Milwaukee Advisory Board. This is a group of event planners who work with Visit Milwaukee and provide them with insight into best practices and what they're looking for when they're looking at destinations and venues to house their events. So we wanted to get initially this meeting was scheduled for January based upon the travel restrictions and the capacity limitations in place within the city of Milwaukee. We pushed these meetings till February, still early enough in the next phase of design where we can take their input and integrate that into the next phase of design elements. Because we want to make sure that we're designing this for the users. The pictures may look nice to us and may work well for us, but if it doesn't work for the meeting planner, then we haven't served our purpose. So those meetings will happen in February. We'll be able to get their input and integrate that into the next phase of planning. As Steve indicated with the finances and looking at where we are with event activity, I think we were one part lucky, one part smart in how we did the 2021 budget. But by the same token, we were somewhat optimistic and hopeful that our worst case projections, which is what we planned for, would be just that, and we would see activity improving earlier than what really seems to be the case. We didn't budget for any activities first half of the year. More likely, that seems that's going to be what's happening, although we had hoped that based on October's holds that we would be able to see some activity March, April. That seems less likely today than it did back in October. What is encouraging is that we're hearing from a lot of the concert promoters, the number of meetings and calls we're having for date availability late summer into the fall and winter of 21 are getting encouraging. We've got had a number of holds put on the calendar the past 2 weeks, and we've gotten information from the Fiserv Forum that events that had been previously canceled are being booked for September, October, November of 21. So we're encouraged that with the COVID vaccination now really being rolled out within the country, that we're hopeful that come late summer, fall of 21, people are feeling comfortable and being permitted to meet again in large groups, and that will enable us to make or beat the plan that we have in place. The last thing I just wanted to mention is that as we have moved into 2021, we have continued the various cost-saving initiatives that we laid out for you over the course of last year. We still have a significant number of our staff members on layoff. Most of the staff that were not laid off are on a furlough, where they're working a 4-day work week and have taken a 20% reduction in pay. Those of us who did not get the furlough have taken a 10% reduction in pay. That continues. And in addition to those cost-saving initiatives that we've maintained, normally the first pay period of the new year is when we implement merit performance increases on an annual basis to the staff. We are not doing that. We felt it was inappropriate to give raises while we still had people on layoff. So based upon my conversations with Steve and our VP of HR, we plan to revisit the economic health of the organization come March. If we see things have maintained as they are, we will continue deferring layoffs until such time as, or not layoffs, but deferring the increase in the merit increase until such time as we believe that the business can support that type of increased expense. So that's just an update to make you aware that we have maintained and are continuing to do everything we can to make sure that we are controlling those costs, that we have some ability to manage ourselves. Mr. Chairman, that's all of my report. If there are any questions from the board, I'm happy to hear.
Thank you. Any questions for Marty on the update from him? Thank you for the great update, and as always. Anybody else? Great. I think we also just have the slight or small aspect of the board meeting for next Friday. Hopefully everyone has it on their calendars. Michael, I do now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good, thank
Yeah,
you.
I have them all for the whole year now, so
Good.
less excuses. I'll still have excuses. Marty, if you could just run through that briefly for us, please, just to make sure and make sure we're all on the same page for the board meeting next Friday.
Next week's board meeting, I expect to follow a fairly similar format that we just went through. Steve will give a financial update to the full board. I'll have the update, CEO update. I'll go through hopefully with some more detail and who the firm is that we selected for naming rights representation. Mike Abrams will be here to give you an update on where we are with project calendar, budget, next steps, what else is the front of mind things that need to be addressed with the expansion. And then that should wrap it up, Jim. I don't think there's really anything on the agenda for voting upon. So it's really just an informational exchange in next week's meeting. No board actions required.
No board actions. I think it'll be great to get an update on where we are with the expansion from Mike. All right. With that, our next item is a personnel discussion. So the committee may convene in closed session pursuant to S 19.851C. Consider the employment, compensation, and performance evaluation of certain WCD employees for which the WCD board has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. The committee is expected to reconvene in open session following this item. I need to vote. Yes. Would entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So moved, Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Senator. Do I have a second?
This is Brennan. I'll second.
Thank you, Joel. With that, the committee will go into vote. We have to vote. Sorry. All in favor of going into closed session? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. We will now move to go into closed session. We will make sure that we clear the room and mute or whatever we need to do. We'll let you know in a second. Thank you.
You're able to do all that.
Hey, Jim, I've got another call coming in. I got to
Can we just? Yeah, because otherwise, because we'll need to vote to.
Otherwise, it's just future meeting dates.
Well, it's just future meeting dates, so Joel, we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Is Joel still on? I think he literally dropped. He literally just dropped, okay. Well, I mean, you're without a quorum, so you could terminate the meeting.
All right, I think at this point, we will terminate the meeting due to not having the quorum. But the two members were on and did have to drop off for other things, and I don't think we have anything else to discuss, so.
Thank you.
All right, Latanya, thank you very much. Have a great one. We'll talk soon.
You too.
See you next week.
Bye.
Talk next week. Steve, Mike, I did talk to Mike